Hello and welcome to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Make sure you find the Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, and please rate and review the show. Reminder, we're streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel and airing live on Sportsnet 360 Monday to Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. I'm your host, Wayne Liu, and for the first segment, joining me on the line is one of the oldest friends I have in this blog game, in this podcasting game, the guy who gave me my start in all of this. Eternally grateful to this man, but also just, a friend who has written a really nice column over at Raptors Republic. It's Zarar, Siddiqi. Zarar, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on, Zarar. I appreciate you. How often do you write these days? Let's be honest.
Man,
You're a busy guy.
I consider myself. I think you took economics. I'm pretty sure when
Yeah.
in university. I consider
Very useful
myself.
degree, by the way, for what I do.
I consider myself an inferior good. So what that means is that when things are going good, you usually buy vacations and cars and that kind of stuff and expensive items. But in times of recession, you need a demand for certain other types of writing increases. So right
Yes.
now the Raptors happen to be in a recession, and I happen to be the inferior good. So I've written like two articles in the last little while. One was the I think article you mentioned, and the second was a breakdown of that. Of those last two possessions against the Bucks, which I'm still feeling the pain from.
Yeah, it was. It's pain, not just from them losing, and not just them losing in overtime, and not just because I'm sure your conclusion was, let's just say heavily tied to Fred. I do think that he made some crucial mistakes, but also I think there's some team efforts around that. But I think, yeah, more painful just because of how bad that game was. I'm not going to revisit that one. That one is like one for the books. That's like right up there with Rudy Gay shooting 11 of 37.
Yeah, it was painful, and I think I don't want to rehash it either,
Yeah.
but it just wasted a really, really amazing last 3 or 4 minutes, the likes of which I don't think I remember seeing the Raptors play.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, the other column, which I thought was really great, it's kind of one of these big picture columns, and I think it was really needed because like we're basically at the halfway point of the season. Like we're pretty close to that. And the column was up at Raptors Republic. It's called "Raptors Hitting Their Limits. What's Next?" And you basically go through all the things that are going on with this team in terms of sort of the experimentation with Vision 6-9. Um, whether or not they pivot into a tank or rebuild, who to kind of keep, who not to keep in that sort of situation. A conclusion on the front office, which I think you kind of look at, and I agree as well in terms of just not adding enough talent to this team, and that's why we're in this problem. But of course, as with all Raptors conversations these days, it starts with Fred. So, you bring in the point of since Kyle Lowry has moved on, the Raptors at the point guard position, right? We've handed it to Pascal, we've handed it to Fred VanVleet. And whoever on the day thinks that they can play point guard has been amusing to watch. So you've added that portion as well because the Raptors has essentially played a lot of guys at point. But you kind of mentioned that Fred, who's supposed to be the number two, just hasn't really gotten going. What are you seeing from Fred? Obviously, we know that the three-point shooting has really fallen off, and he offers some explanation for that. We're going to get to that in the second segment on his appearance on the JJ Redick podcast. But in your watching of Fred in the last this essentially half year already, half season. What's been the problem?
Well, I think Fred has become sort of the lightning rod, which is attracting all the criticism. I mean, all the problems the team has had, they seem to gravitate towards Fred because he's sort of become the beacon or the representative of the problems that the Raptors have, and that's not really fair to him. He has definitely struggled, and one of the main reasons he's struggled, and his percentages, his 3-point percentages show this, is that quite simply he has moved away from the rim when it comes to shooting. Like he's extended his 3-point shooting from his usual 21-foot range to like 23, 24. And even the shot he took against Milwaukee, but if you consider that's not a good shot. No matter who's guarding him, that's not a good shot from
Mm-hmm.
that distance.
Yeah, yeah.
But those are the kind of shots that he's taking, so his percentages have fallen. Now, because he's kind of like one of the highest paid players on the team and he's performing poorly, everybody's like, Fred's the problem. And he totally has, and the Raptors have tried to hide him by moving the ball over to Siakam, letting him play make more, turning Fred into a spot up shooter, basically trying to do anything to make sure that Fred's advantages, which is his shooting, are emphasized, and his weak points like his driving ability or his lack of speed are sort of hidden. Now, that's Fred. But at the same time, a lot of the pressure is because the Raptors happen to have a 26th ranked bench in the league and are 29th in 3 point shooting. Fred is part of the problem there, no doubt, especially part of the 3 point shooting problem. But because the Raptors have so many other issues going on, especially their bench, which is
Oh man,
poor by any standard.
so bad.
It's
7 points a game
it,
bad right now.
and what's also surprising is that the Raptors have a youth system, which in the Raptors 905, which sort of you expect to produce some level of bench level talent. I mean, you don't expect them to produce Pascal Siakams every year, but you expect that factory to produce at least something resembling a productive
Yeah,
bench player.
like a Chris
And they
Boucher.
haven't, like a Boucher who's also struggled.
Yeah.
So Boucher struggling, Precious being injured, Barnes struggling this year. People look at, okay, who's going to pick up the slack, and they look at their best players, and the best players are Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet. Pascal's doing his part, no doubt. Fred's not. So because of all the other things that are going on, Fred has ended up becoming this like magnetic source of controversy and disappointment because he happens to be one of the two best players. And I remember talking about the question of like I'm going back to the Chris Bosh years was like,
Mm.
is Chris Bosh a number one player? Can you build a team around him? And some of the same questions were asked of Pascal Siakam. Is he a number one guy? Can you build a championship team around him? And I think he's answered that to some degree, but I think the bigger question you have to ask is Fred a number two option on a championship team? I think that is a bigger question than is Siakam a number one option on a title team. And so far, Fred has struggled to adapt to this bigger role. And I'll also add that teams. Sometimes people think like it's a 12v12 game, and you have the coaches and the players. But these days teams employ vast amount of scouts and analytics and whatever. So if something worked for you one year, like Fred's 3 point shooting worked pretty well last year, well, this year there's no guarantees it's going to work because
Mhm.
there's so much the scouting has increased like what 500% in this league with all the technology and all that. So something that worked one year is not guaranteed to work next year, which makes extrapolation of wins or extrapolation of success in general a very difficult game to play.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, I think that's first off, that's exactly what your piece does. It's like it highlights a lot of these problems, ties them sort of together, and we're gonna go through honestly point by point because I really loved it. But I think specifically to Fred, I mean, the number two option is in a it's just it hasn't really worked out. Let's just say that. I don't think that when Fred is interviewed about it, he talks about having the ball taken out of his hands and how he's not finding the rhythm. I'm not really here to like negate sort of his experience about that because I really do think that that would impact in terms of the rhythm. But to me, it's also like, well, that doesn't necessarily explain that on wide open catch and shoots, which you were really good at last season, why that's dropped off so significantly. Like I literally last time at this point of the season, he was at 50% on catch and shoot threes, and right now he's at like 32. And when you take that extra 20% and you multiply it by the number of attempts, and when you look at a lot of these games, when you have lost some of these games, one or two more threes would have made the difference. Now, I also agree with you because there's a big nuance here because with Fred, him taking making one or two more shots isn't necessarily the only thing wrong with the team. I think there's underperformance across the board when you look at some of the other pieces, and that's to single out Fred specifically for that. It's not. He might be like one of the biggest problems, but he is not the only problem, right? And I think that that's where you got to really diagnose the team. Um, and yeah, I mean, when you look at the roster and some of the other guys who are, not necessarily playing well and playing great, how much of that is sort of tied to this idea of Division 6-9 with all the forwards and everything like that? Because as you highlight in your piece, one of the issues is they don't have a lot of dribble penetration because a lot of these forwards aren't really great at navigating tight spaces and getting downhill outside of Pascal, of course. Um, there's not a lot of 3 point shooting. There's not a lot of pick and roll happening. And weirdly enough, their defense isn't that great. So, give me your assessment on Vision 6-9 so far.
Well, first of all, I love the idea of experimentation with a lineup. So kudos to the Raptors franchise for trying something different because in
Sure.
this league, when you can't, and I know as much as Toronto is a better place for free agents now, it doesn't have that same stigma that it used to maybe in the last 10, 15 years. You still can't rely on just signing the next big free agent. So you have to have some sort of something that attracts people, something organic that you can use to build your success on. So kudos to the Raptors for actually trying this experiment. But at some point in any experiment, you have to ask, have we collected sufficient amount of data to see whether this thing works or doesn't?
Mm.
And I think that's the question at this point you have to ask is, what other configuration of the current lineup or current strategy can you employ which will produce a different result? So great that we're doing an experiment with the 6-9 thing, but now that this experiment has yielded some data that your 3-point shooting is lacking, you have too much dribble penetration, and very counterintuitively, your defense is quite poor, which is
Mhm.
something that I don't think anybody thought
No.
going into this. People thought the defense was going to be better because of the length and the wingspan and the deflections they would generate. And it would overall, we were expecting like a top 5, 6 defense in the league. At least I was. All that hasn't happened. So that's feedback to you as a franchise on what this experiment is yielding. Now the question is, are you gonna act on it, or are you gonna just kind of push through and say, okay, this is happening because of injuries, or this is the point in time, let's push through? And that's kind of what the main question at the deadline really is that, do you actually go ahead and abandon this experiment, or do you try to push through? Um, I think your question was why we're seeing such poor numbers in defense and 3-point shooting. I think let me tackle 3-point shooting first.
Yep.
Well, the short answer is that, well, we don't have great 3-point shooters. I mean,
Or
and the
many.
3-point shooters,
We have like maybe 4.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the guy that we our free agent signing in the summer, who was supposed to bring that, has been injured. So Masai could look at that and go, oh, maybe it's just an Otto Porter Jr. issue. I don't think it is. I think
No,
that's just
come on.
that's it's this is bigger than Otto Porter Jr. This is a question of a bunch of our 3-point shooters not performing, and also not necessarily getting the clean looks that they need to knock down the shot. So there's no 3-point shooting. That's because there's no dribble penetration and there's no creativity. You can only ask Pascal Siakam to do so much. The guy is. I look at him in the. He starts the third quarter, and by the time he goes to the bench at the third quarter break, the guy looks gassed.
Oh
And
yeah.
now we're asking this guy to come into the fourth quarter and handle the ball, score. Nobody's able to do that. He's not that level of player. So 3-point shooting is a larger problem across the board.
Mhm.
What was the other point? The
Well, the
well,
Raptors
the
don't run
bench.
the pick and roll either. And again, these are all kind of things
Oh,
that
right.
which
Yeah.
honestly, even last season we saw
Yeah.
these are points of weaknesses, right? Shooting,
Yeah.
in terms of the lack of dribble penetration. I mean, even the lack of dribble penetration, I think that's where ideally you would see Fred contribute more to that, because that's just a position where you usually see it from guards more than you see it
The-
from
the-
big wings, right? Big wings can use the pick and roll, manipulate. If you're really able to shoot, bring guys really close to you, then use your handle, get past a guy. Like we've seen big wings obviously dominate in that sense as well. But the Raptors don't actually have that. They do have Pascal, who's able to get past his man, draw the second guy, and he's obviously doing his very best. He's excluded from these conversations, but he's like the only guy who can actually put pressure on the paint, which is, a real issue when that means that all the other people can kind of be much more static defensively and not have these super long closeouts where you see, like, honestly, it's a very big difference watching the Raptors shoot threes and how the Raptors are guarded from three versus like when the Raptors have to guard the 3-point line themselves. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of like swing into the corner. Guys are just flying around trying to like maybe climb out and maybe deflect the three or maybe force them to relocate. Versus for the Raptors, it's a lot more static, like drive, kick, one pass out. And that guy has to hit the three on the wing.
Well, you mentioned dribble penetration, right? And Fred VanVleet, and the two and the pick and roll, they all kind of go hand in hand, because in most cases you dribble penetrate because you are quicker than your defender and you
Sure.
can
Yeah.
get by them. Like Kyrie, Shy, SGA, all these people have that quickness that can get you past your man without the need of a screen. Um, and the pick and roll actually does that a little bit. If you set a screen, you give the guard the option to drive. Since the Raptors have a slower guard in Fred VanVleet, he's not going to blow by any defender one-on-one consistently. He actually needs a lot of help in getting into the paint. And because the Raptors, they run some high screen action pretty
Mm.
further out from the 3-point line, that's not a pick and roll. That's just a high screen out from the 3-point line. What I'm talking about is a pick and roll closer to the 3-point line, where Fred has the opportunity to turn frequently, and also has an option to kind of make a bounce pass to a big who's rolling to the rim or kick out to the three. Since the Raptors don't do that, they actually hamper Fred's ability to create because he doesn't have options on what to do with the ball.
Mm.
He's more or less a dribble handoff guy to whoever's swinging back. Usually it's Gary Trent Jr. or Siakam who's coming behind Fred to take the ball from him rather than Fred driving in and having options both at the 3 point line and inside the paint to make a pass. And the guy that I think we Raptor fans sort of look forward to, and this is kind of, this kind of says where the Raptors are at. I mean, they look at Kem Birch as a guy who is good in the pick and roll and who can actually do that. But people forget Kem
Yeah,
Birch
come on.
was a journeyman player in Orlando. Like this is not like we got some vet, with playoff experience who knows how to do things. He's learning just like the rest of it. So to rely on Kem Birch to set screens and run the pick and roll, that's a losing proposition.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's one of the things when you try to build with all these 6'9" guys, and I completely understand the theory behind it, but then when you don't have like a successful pick and roll big, I think that also makes playing the pick and roll much harder for some of the Raptors pick and roll guards, right? Like I think that might be one of the reasons why Malachi Flynn has had to essentially redefine his whole entire role going from college to pro, which isn't like entirely unique. Lots of people have to redefine their roles after college and stuff like that. But like, I think for him, one of the strengths in which you drafted a guy like that in the first round is that he's there to play pick and roll for you. Or Fred VanVleet is very, very, I mean, he's a pick and roll guard more than anything else, especially because he needs to screen it so to get free. But he has the attributes that you want to see from a pick and roll player in the sense that he can really pull up for three. He has, his passing package is good. It's not elite, but it's good. But he doesn't have that guy to play pick and roll with on the team. I mean, that I think that's why you're seeing much more and more now where Scotty is sort of playing like a de facto 5 role, not only because he's sort of a point center in that role. And again, like this is just describing the role, not saying that that's what he is specifically, but he's setting that screen and they're finding him. And the fact that they're even using him in some of these pick and roll scenarios, he's obviously not a pick and roll center either, but he's better at functioning in that screener role and actually making a play when he catches it, outside of a layup than anyone else on the roster, really. So they're almost having to sort of wedge him into that role. And so yeah, no, it's a couple of problems, and I think even the shooting thing. I mean, I do, and you made this point that a lot of the Raptors shooters are shooting below their averages this season, and that to you seems more like a shot generation thing. But to me, it's just like I don't know. At some point, aren't we also talking about the same players who had a pretty good season last year that we're all pretty happy about at the end of the day? Like, what changed? I think that's probably what's the confusing part for a lot of the guys because they're looking at the same players and the same rosters. The big change was Otto Porter in the offseason. He hasn't even played. So we're literally talking about the exact same team. So is there another explanation for the team-wide drop-off?
Not that. I mean, I think you have to look at. No, I don't have a great explanation for that or an answer for that. But it goes back to like maybe nothing changed with the Raptors, and a lot changed with how other teams view the Raptors or know how to defend them. Sometimes we go like, oh, he missed a shot, he should have made that shot. Why isn't he shooting the exact same percentage as last year? But we don't necessarily pay attention to the nuances of like, where did he catch the ball? Who passed him the ball? Was it a bounce pass or was it a chest pass? I don't know. All these things sort of matter. But I agree with you. I don't have Raptor fans in general don't have a great answer on why there is a drop off across the board. But going back to your pick and roll point is that it's cool to have Pascal Siakam and Scotty play, point center. By the way, point center, like what is that even? That sounds like a scam. Sounds like a Bitcoin. Um, but variety is the spice of life, man. So even if Pascal at the point is your go-to strategy, that can't be your only way to generate offense. You have to mix it up and throw defenses different looks because I feel that when you're playing an opponent now, the other team can pretty much predict with good accuracy on what the Raptors will run on every possession.
Yeah.
They have to worry about maybe one thing instead of 2 or 3 things. And I think that's a problem. I mean, that can work for stretches, maybe a month or 2 months, but teams make mid-season adjustment and they make in-game adjustments, and that sort of stuff kind of catches up to you.
Yeah, no, and I think the point on scouting I think is really good too because the one thing you do hear from the opposing players time and time again when they come in, the stars, they always talk about how even on the defensive end, where I do think the Raptors are very creative on that front, and I think anyone who thinks that Nick isn't creative on defense, I mean, I just don't know what you're watching. But at the same time, you can only reinvent the wheel so many times, and you can throw out the sort of the the junk playbook, or and I mean that in a nice way, like in the same way that actually Steph kind of called it janky as well, when he was actually just trying to describe it as being weird, not as an insult. But when you have stars coming in is essentially saying, I'm going to expect this and this and this to happen, right? I think that's also speaks to the scouting department as well. But I think when we look at the bigger picture, right, the trade deadline comes up in about a month here. I think it's pretty clear now that the Raptors are probably going to try to sell. And so, in that sense, when you got to look at the core pieces of the team, you didn't even mention Scotty. Obviously, I don't think Scotty's moving anywhere. Your position is keep Pascal, move Fred. Gary's probably a keeper for you too. You're a little bit confused as to why Gary is always mentioned so often, and that OG probably shouldn't go anywhere. Did I have that right?
Yeah, I mean, you did. I mean, the Gary thing amuses me, man, because like if Gary is traded, he's being traded for the fault that he's played well, which which doesn't make any sense to me, especially because his age is aligned with kind of the contention window or the time window for Scotty Barnes, and that's one of the reasons that OG is in there as well. Because OG, I think we should just level set our expectations of the guy. No matter what kind of team you are building,
Mm.
you're always going to have a need for a good defensive wing, a decent 3-point shooter, a hard worker, guy who can play the passing lanes, does all the things that OG does, and he's tied to a reasonable contract and all that good stuff. I just don't see, even if you're, and I don't think we're talking about, when we say tank, I think we should qualify that. I don't think we're talking about going into a multi-year, like Philadelphia 76ers type situation. We're talking about like maybe tanking the rest of the year. I don't know what you feel about that. But no matter what you do, I just feel that guys like Gary and OG at their age and at their skill level is something you would need. And unless you're getting something like which is clearly better than those two in return,
Mm.
I don't see a sense in moving those two.
So then, like, what is the rebuilding then? You know what I mean? Like, we're just back here on the same team. Like, how do we improve
Yeah.
the bench, right? And I think this is
Yeah.
where, if I have to give the front office like some leeway, it's like that. Like, there's not that many like the pieces that the other teams would want out of the Raptors are the pieces that are fundamental to what the Raptors would need when they eventually try to win again. Which I think, by the way, they're very clearly trying to win. I mean, you don't play your starters 47 minutes without trying to win.
Yeah, I think having said the OG Fred thing, I think to get something of reasonable value in return, you probably will have to trade one of them, right? Well, I'm talking about Gary and OG, sorry,
Mm.
and of course Fred as well. So I think you're not going to make a great trade unless you give up somebody of value. We saw that with the DeMar trade and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
so yes, there's going to be some parting of ways with players that we don't want to leave, that we want to retain, but that's just part of the game. But my question really is it are we going into because if we're going into a rebuild where we expect the next contending team to be in like 3 years, then in the summertime you have to talk about Pascal, because I think it might be Pascal who's like, well, I don't think I want to be part of the situation. We're sort of assuming that he's always going to want to play here, but he's 28, 29. He's going to be entering the prime of his career so far. He wants to play on a championship team. I don't think he would be interested in being part of a 3-year rebuild.
I mean, okay, a 3-year rebuild. Obviously, I think that might be a little bit hard to sell to any sort of active star, but at the same time, I do look at Pascal. I just don't see any of that history. Like even this season, right? I think it'd be very easy for Pascal, who's working really hard right now and kind of alone out there in a lot of these nights, where he could just say, and he's interviewed quite often by the press, and he can kind of like point fingers at his teammates or point fingers at anything else. He doesn't ever do that. He's in a very positive space. And yeah, I mean, I understand that like this is the recent trend for star players. Is that like when things go bad, they kind of run. But I don't know. Maybe it's just, maybe I'm being a little naive here, but I really do think that Pascal is going to kind of stay committed to this program. But obviously, I think the program has to be committed to putting pieces around him too. And even if you, like, for example, like hypothetically, if OG were to be moved, you kind of go one of two directions, right? You can try to package OG and with some other pieces, and you roll it up into a secondary star, right? Which is essentially like what you really need to see with this team. Either someone steps up into that, either Fred returns back to where he was last season in the first half of the year, whether Scotty really accelerates his development and he is the clear-cut number 2, or the Raptors package OG with some picks and get a clear defined number two behind Pascal. Like that's ultimately the goal, I think, from the trade. If they go the other direction of a trade like that, which is just to sort of liquidate and get like future assets that are like 2025, 2027 draft picks, then that's stuff where it's like much less appealing because you're essentially taking away your best defensive player and you're asking Pascal to essentially do even more with even less, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I can make an analogy, I think you sort of are looking for a trade like the New Orleans Pelicans pulled, where they tried to get Zion some help in the in McCollum last year. So I think
Sure.
that's the type of trade that I think the Raptors might be seeking if they want to accelerate their rebuild.
Yeah. And listen, the Pelicans, I mean, the front office has done a great job over there, man. David Griffin, you got to really tip your cap to him. Obviously, he handled the AD trade pretty well, got tons and tons and tons of picks. Also got great players, right? Got Brandon Ingram in that swap. But even when you look at some of the players, like when you watch them, you're like, damn, this Dyson Daniels, pretty impressive. Trey Murphy the third, pretty impressive. Jose Alvarado, pretty impressive. And I think that's the other piece where you sort of concluded on your story is just like the front office has got to add more to this roster. Like and it's starting to get picked up a little bit here and there. I saw Eric Kareen wrote about it over at The Athletic. Blake was on Tuesday, and he kind of really highlighted sort of just like the Raptors who have really been a developmental organization who have done a really great job. And you can always point to OG, Pascal, Fred as sort of like the defining pieces of that. But at the lower end of the rotation, when we're talking about these like undrafted guys that they're sort of picking up every year or second round picks that they're picking up, obviously there's a low hit rate, but the hit rate right now is like 0 in the last couple of years. There's not like a single guy in the last like essentially 3 seasons now going on where they brought them in as a low sort of investment kind of thing, whether it's a second round pick, whether that's undrafted, whether that's whatever, or even just like recycling an old prospect and getting them a second chance. They're hitting 0
Hey,
on that. Not a single one of those players are contributing to the Raptors right now
it,
or even moving forward.
I mean, it's time to bring Freddie Gillespie back. Is what I'm
Oh
hearing.
my God. That was dark. Now that was dark. I know people really got on Aaron Baines, but Freddie Gillespie, I think, was actually worse. It was tough. But yeah, no, but seriously,
Yeah,
man, that's what the
yeah.
Messiah gave us. Like it's been like a lot of Stanley Johnson, a lot of Rondé Hollis Jefferson, and honestly, Rondé was pretty decent for what he kind of came in for. But like guys who they've tried to sort of do something with. Terrence Davis, obviously there was an off court issue with that, and they moved on from him, right? But like Utah, they tried to develop, it didn't work out. Now it's working out. O'Shea Brissett tried to develop him, it didn't really work out. Now he's going somewhere else. It's happening, and I'm not trying to say that like these are things that you evaluate a GM on. But when you look at systemically over 2 to 3 years, when you don't have any of these guys that you can find out of the blue, it really does cut against like the next talent pipeline. The reason the bench is so dry is because of that exact reason,
hmm and that goes back to the point of earlier about the 905 not necessarily producing the requisite quality we need. But I do want
Yeah.
to make sure I say one thing is that once we won the title, I told myself that this is such a unique moment for Toronto
Yeah.
sports. Not in my lifetime that I thought this might happen. Well, maybe not in my lifetime, but not for a while. I expected this to happen. That whatever Masai does for the 5 years after the title, he
Mm.
has earned it. So if he wants to go burn this thing down and
Oh
instead of
yeah. No.
6'9", do another kind of strategy of 6'4" and no more, and just like have short people on the team, and he wants to experiment with that, all the power to him, man. He's earned it. So he's got one more year after this one to experiment with. I don't know maybe he's going to get somebody from the Euro League or something. I don't know. Maybe it's going to be Maurizio Gherardini again.
Oh
Who
man.
knows? But man, let's give him 5 years because he's earned it.
Yeah. No.
While I enjoy my title.
Here's the thing. This is the big difference, right? No one, well, probably no one will ever reasonably say we need to change out the front office. Like the front office is going to have eternal credit because they've deserved it and they've done a really great job on the whole, and of course because of the championship. But this is not going to be a market where people are going to be like, remember back in the day, it was like, let's get Brian Colangelo out of here. Let's get rid of all the old Brian Colangelo guys, and then before that Rob Babcock, and before that, whatever. And it's just like that used to be a conversation. You're not going to hear that conversation. I don't think anyone's going to reasonably have that in a good faith. But at the same time, we can say that this is what we want out of the front office, or that this is what they haven't done well. But I think they kind of eventually earn everyone's eternal trust. But yeah, Zarar, before you go, what's going on? Live show?
Oh
Rivoli?
yeah, let me just say
Pre-deadline?
one thing. So
Okay,
it's
yeah.
our responsibility as fans to hold the G and media to hold the GM and the management accountable and surface these issues consistently.
Mm.
Like that's part of our job, I think, as media. So I think by talking about it and highlighting these issues, I think that's what media is supposed to do.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be like the opposition, if you will, in a political system to make sure that the team is accountable.
Mm.
Yes, the live event, hell of a time to hold a live event when the team is going
Hey,
down.
listen, it could be an active deadline. That's all I'm trying to say. So I
Yeah,
don't know. It could be a good thing.
yeah. So February 7th at Rivoli, Toronto, we got, we're going to talk trade deadline, which is going to be 2 days away. So all the Raptors Republic writers are going to be there. Will, of course, you and Alex are welcome to come and have some fun.
Are
But
we
we're
having
going to
free
talk some
drinks again?
basketball.
Because no, I'm kidding, man.
Hey,
You know
man,
I'm there.
you got free drinks for life at RR. Don't worry about
Oh,
it.
I know that, man. I appreciate you, bro.
So yeah, come out February 7th at Rivoli, Toronto. It's at 6 p.m. It's going to be about a 2 to 3 hour podcast. There's 10% off food, a bunch of things. There's just talk some Raptors basketball with fellow hardcore fans. Come out and hope to meet you all.
Yeah, man. Tickets $20. You know, all proceeds going towards the writers. You know, get yourself a Raptors Republic subscription if you haven't already. Fairly cheap. Is the Boxing Day sale still going on? I saw that going on the other day.
I know it's over. It's over.
You missed out. But listen, these guys are worth full price of admission. All right, Zarar. Appreciate you, man. Hope you're doing well. All right. Congrats to your Gooners, by the way. All right. I hope you guys hold on for the rest of the year. I know you guys are gonna be holding off like this cyborg of a team with literally a cyborg at striker scoring 3 goals a game. But you know, listen, you just got to get 2 draws against them and then hold on strong, man. You guys are looking really good. I'm rooting for you guys this year. I'm not kidding, man. I really don't want to see another city title.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. I'm loving it.
Yeah. All right. We're going to take a quick break right here. I've been your host, Wolu, and you've been listening to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. On the other side, Alex Wong joins the show, as he does 3 times a week. Welcome back to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, William Liu. I'm joined by producer and co-host Alex Wong, as he is here every Friday. And yeah, Alex, what's going on, man? Big haircut plan for you today before the game. A lot of plans for you.
Yeah, just looked in the mirror yesterday and didn't really like my hair, so
okay.
Gotta change it up.
What
I
do you
don't
gotta
even
do?
know why I go get a haircut because I just wear hats every day.
Yeah, but you
So-
still need to be fresh.
Yeah, I guess
You're
you
by
gotta
yourself.
be fresh, clean up. Hopefully the Raptors can get a win tonight against the New York Knickerbockers.
Right.
Exciting times.
I can't wait, man.
Yeah,
We got a live feed of the arena right now in the studio.
yeah. You seem like you're in a better mood today. What's up?
There's no reason to be in a bad mood. It's just basketball. I had a very peaceful time yesterday doing pottery.
Oh,
You
right.
know, my second time doing pottery was real fun. Shout out to the Clay Art Studio. Perhaps maybe that's a free class. No.
Oh, okay. So you're
No.
the new Klay Thompson.
I was literally Clay Thompson yesterday with the C, man. I was showing you some of my
Yeah,
the bowls.
but you told
and-
me you
and
can't
cups.
take the pottery that you create with you.
So
That seems like a scam to me.
it's no, I mean, okay, so it was definitely a full experience
Not
in
to
terms
call
of
out
like
the place.
no, it's not a scam. I mean, I think it was in the fine print or it was pretty clearly stated somewhere
If
that
it's
you
in
don't
the
actually
fine
get to
print,
keep.
it's a scam. Man.
Okay, fair. But for me, I was just like, I think over the course of the class, I got so excited, I got so into it. You're on that wheel and you got that sponge and you got little things and you're like using
Yeah.
your thumbs and all these ways and you're playing with the clay. So it's just genuinely fun.
Sounds very relaxing, honestly.
It was super relaxing. It was like the best 2 hours I spent yesterday. Was just doing that. On my way to the studio, I had a little bit of a scooter crash as well.
Oh my God, what happened?
Yeah,
man?
landed on my knee.
You all right? I still
Uh,
need to get you a helmet, by the way. My
Yeah,
bad.
this was not ideal because it was like kind of rainy outside, and I went over some train tracks up on Old Weston. Shout out to Derek knows Old Weston. So yeah, there's like wood and there's like train tracks, and it was slippery and it was at night, and I kind of went over a little too fast, kind of skidded out a little bit. Everything's fine. It just landed on my knee.
It's
Got
not
through.
Osler.
It's not Osler. You're right. Osler better. Wow,
Mm.
we're really
Osler's like, hills over
Yeah.
the train tracks.
Damn, happy Friday, everybody.
But anyway, you don't get to keep it. No, but I did forget this fact. So I made like 4 like bowls and cups that are actually pretty decent looking.
No, you showed me the photos. It looks great.
But unfortunately, at the very end, I was like, "So, instructor, when can we come back for these?" And she was like, "You don't. I'm destroying this as soon as you leave the studio." And
you
they're
say-
repurposing the clay.
You say you have to take 3 lessons?
Yeah, you gotta take 3 lessons apparently.
Once
But
again,
I
sounds
might do
like
that.
sounds like a scam to me.
It was fun though.
Oh, okay. No, I'm glad you had a good time.
That's a good way to therapize yourself with the Raptors being so poor.
no,
right now.
but pottery sounds like a really good time.
Do you have Friday shoutouts before we get to these Fred VanVleet clips? Or
Yeah,
no?
this Friday, just want to give a special shout out to Kyle Kreb.
Yeah.
For always being so helpful
Mm.
with the show. So,
Mr. Thanks for your email.
yeah, so I just want to thank Kyle Kreb.
Okay. No
This
one else
Friday.
though? What about the
Uh,
guests? Who's on the show this week, man?
Lots of great guests this week.
Mhm.
There was Zarar, Siddiqi.
Yep.
It was a great segment.
Mhm.
Who else did we have?
Blake.
Yeah, Vivek Jacob.
Yeah.
Blake Murphy.
Mm-hmm.
So Lindsay
Lindsay?
Dunn was here as well.
Nice.
Great
nice,
guess.
Very good. What about the Sportsnet employees? Other than Kyle Crave?
Just Kyle. Yeah.
Just Kyle.
Yeah, that was one.
No-
that,
no one
that-
else,
That,
huh?
that was one of the feedbacks I received. We're trying to shorten.
No
the
more
shout-outs.
DT. No more.
Their names are.
No more Ryan Favreau.
No,
no
shout
more
out to-
Greg Sansoni.
Shout outs to all of them. Yeah. Shout
All right.
outs to all of them.
All right. Let's get to that first clip. So Fred VanVleet went on the Ginger Reddick podcast, and as Fred does, he makes himself available to press, and then he
To player media. Yeah.
player media, but also us. But come on, man.
Yes,
How many
yes,
times
yes,
have we
yes,
interviewed
yes.
Fred? Like honestly, like even when I was like nobody at that time, and we went, I interviewed Fred at the back of a Foot Locker, and we drafted 3-on-3 teams. That's actually a pretty good segment one time. But no, seriously, Fred is always very generous with his time, as you know. And he went on the Ginger Reddick podcast where he kind of discussed essentially like what's wrong with this season.
Fred, I want to talk about your play right now.
Yeah.
Because going back to the end of last season when you had a couple injuries, your shooting numbers tailed off a little bit. Obviously, you were in the conversation for All NBA last year. And then to start this year, you've dealt with some stuff. You're coming off a back injury where you were out a couple games. And I read an interview where you said at this point it's all mental. Like the shooting thing is all mental. From someone who dealt with different injuries at time, though, it's very hard as you're on the move, you're shooting off the dribble, you're shooting off pin downs, whatever it may be. It's very hard to not compensate when your body's not right. How much have the injuries affected your shooting?
Probably a lot. You know what I mean? And I gotta be careful with what I say sometimes, and it's a lot going on, and just being in the business of it, I've learned how to try to, manipulate it as best I can. I think that early on in the season, it was definitely adjustment. I think from a stylistic point, the way we were playing last year was just kind of free and easy, and I think I was much more a focal point with just on-ball duties and having the ball the whole game and being able to kind of dictate where I wanted to go. And this year, that's changed a little bit. So I'm kind of just like, catching the rhythm. So you know how it goes. Some nights the ball finds you, some nights it doesn't. And the nights where it doesn't, those are the nights that I'm struggling this year, where it's like the out of rhythm games where I may get a couple catch and shoots, couple contested ones, couple ones off the dribble, not getting to the foul line. And then, I get 3 wide open ones at the end of the night when we need them. And if I make them, we win. If I miss them, we lose. I've had probably like 4 or 5 of those games. So I think it's a big drop off from like where I was as far as an all-star caliber point guard to where I am now. But I think it's pretty situational too, in terms of where we are as a team and as an organization, trying to figure out, what's the best way to maximize the most out of this team. And I got a lot of other responsibilities other than just like scoring the ball. So I'm doing a lot, and that shooting has been up and it's been down way more than I would like it to be. So I'm giving myself a little runway, but at the same time, just being realistic about where we are. And when I really, really feel like shit, I just go watch the film and say, okay, well, I was 2 for 12 from 3, and 8 of them were bombs, and 3 of them were heavily contested by a 7-footer, and I missed 3 wide open ones, in my 39th minute of the night. So it's like you got to be able to be fair with yourself too, but come in and just put the work in too.
Okay, so as Fred is, as you can hear right there, right? Very, very transparent, very honest. Honestly, great job by JJ Redick and also Tommy Alter. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to disrespect. I actually just don't listen to the pod enough.
Oh, okay.
But every time I listen to the pod, I really, really enjoy it. And I really got to add it to the rotation. I'm sorry, it's just a lot of Brian Windhorst and Coach David Thorpe in there right now.
Oh yeah.
And Zach Lowe, of course.
Shouts to the hoop.
Actually, shouts to the mismatch as well. I do kind of like how mismatched they are personality wise.
Oh,
but
yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
as Fred always
Like
does,
here.
and since you can hear there, was pretty transparent about sort of why he thinks he's been struggling. Now, I think I've seen a lot of the reaction on this has been the other way of like Fred talking about transitioning off ball, which he also said to me in a press conference or in a like media scrum on Boxing Day as well, kind of shared the exact kind of idea of like transition and playing off ball. And a lot of people are sort of pushing back on this and saying, well, based on the stats, the usage rate is not too different, right? Last year, his usage was 23.7%. This year, it's 22.4%. So we're talking about a 1.3 percentage drop in usage, which literally could happen within a week. When you think about the shot attempts, his shot attempts are only down 1 from last year. Last year is at 16.9. This year is at 15.8. So a lot of people are sort of pointing to like, I don't really see what new role Fred VanVleet is in. But I also, when I saw those numbers, it was a little confusing to me as well, because it's like eye test wise, it just didn't look the exact same.
Yeah,
I know you're a big fan of the eye test.
Yes.
So then I looked at in terms of in the lineups in which Fred is out there with other guys, right? Because obviously Fred's usage is going to be high when he's out there with the bench, right? Or he's in those transition lineups. What does Fred's usage look like when he's out there with the rest of the starters, right?
It's probably dipped, right?
Fred VanVleet, when he's on the floor with Gary Trent Jr., OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes, Fred VanVleet has the lowest usage rate among that group. Pascal in that group has a 25% usage, which is exactly how it should be. Scotty has a 22% usage, which is up from last year. OG has a 20% usage. Gary Trent has a 20% usage. Fred VanVleet has a usage rate of 13.6% when he's in the starting group, right? And you might say, well, listen, Gary hasn't been in the starting group a lot of the times. What if we remove Gary from that group? Now, of course, the stats do change a little bit, but ultimately, Fred's usage is still 15.6%. That's even if you remove Gary from the starting lineup and you replace him with like whoever else has started this year, Thad,
Juancho.
Christian, Juancho,
Yeah.
everybody. If you haven't started for
Malachi.
the Raptors this season, it might
That's
be
a
some
real
problem.
doghouse.
It might be a real, Thad Young, you know what I mean? Like everyone started for the Raptors this season. But even if you take out Gary, who obviously is going to be shoot first, Fred's usage still 15.8%. So I think that's what he's trying to highlight. The fact that when he's out there with the main guys, his job is clearly to just distribute and then catch and shoot. which is sort of like what I've been seeing for the most part on the eye test. Now, of course, we've had injuries and he's scaled up his production. There are games where he had back-to-back 39-point games. You wouldn't say he was a fifth option in those games. But I think on the whole, that was the idea coming into the season. And if he says it's affecting his rhythm, then what can you really say? Like, we're not in the mind of the player. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, you know, he talked about him having a lot more other responsibilities, right? And him talking about how he just hasn't been as comfortable this season versus last year when it felt like it was more free-flowing. And I think the numbers that you just gave me kind of bears that out in terms of, like, he's playing different roles within every game depending on what the roster is, right?
Yeah.
Because that, I think, gets to what he's saying about the rhythm.
Sure.
Like when you're playing with the bench guys, you know, he's going to be taking a more on-ball role, maybe looking more for a shot. And then you talk about the usage rate dropping when he's playing with the starters. I like you said, though, if this is how he's explaining it, this is how he feels. I don't think people need to necessarily agree with it.
I think by the way, people clearly don't agree with it, man.
Fred right now is
they don't
just,
agree with it, bro.
Fred
He is
right
literally
now,
public enemy #1 right now.
What is a worse term than like a lightning rod? Because that's what he is for like the fan base right now.
He's
right?
like a dumping ground.
Yeah,
right now.
It's like a dynamite right now. But it's like I get it, but also I think at the end of the day, everybody can agree that we just need Fred to shoot better. Because he's talked about.
By the way, this is not me defending Fred. By the way, this is just me trying to contextualize this conversation because what he was saying about the role change wasn't necessarily reflected in the overall stats, so we had to dig a little bit deeper
and I think,
to maybe see what he was getting at.
No, I think you're exactly right.
No one's defending Fred, man. I'm literally there's no economy for defending Fred right now.
Like I've said,
he's just got to shoot better, man.
I'm not defending Fred until he talks to you this season. But like,
okay.
I think
he's going to do a JJ Redick podcast. I think he's good on podcasts.
I think that leads to. By the way, I love how JJ gets to sit in that like nice little back room too at the practice facility.
We sit in a nice room too, man.
Shouts to JQ's office. Love the frame jersey in there, but I think the other thing too, like the way that Fred is talking about it, it goes back to the bigger conversation just about role definition, right?
Yeah.
Like how many roles are defined on this team?
That was the thing that was also telling because when I talked to Fred about this exact issue. I asked him essentially like, how did the front office and coaching staff sell this to you? And he said, they didn't sell this to them. He's just like, I just kind of took a hint. You know what I mean? So again, but like, you shouldn't have to take hints, right? Especially with a guy who's been with the franchise a long time. And I'm sure they have conversations sort of beyond this as well that are maybe more explicit. But everyone's got to be in their defined roles. And then, of course, everyone's got to find a way to thrive in his role. And to be honest, with Fred, he's got to find a way to thrive in that role. Right now, they're just asking him to catch and shoot. They're taking a lot of the point duties, giving it to Pascal, giving it to Scotty. And they're just asking him to catch and shoot. And, of course, defend his position. And right now, he's not doing a good enough job of that. And that's part of the reason why the Raptors are struggling. The overall thing, though, man, I mean, when you think about the Raptors fan base over the years, in terms of guys who have been in this position where, like, all the heat is on them, it reminds me, in a way, of sort of where Pascal was in the bubble.
Right.
Of course, that one went way too far. It reminds me a little bit of where DeMar used to be. Before everyone loved DeMar, by the way, I would say the inflection point for DeMar happened in like 2017. But there was a real stretch between like 2011 to 2016 even, where it was very debatable. It was a big topic of debate how good DeMar DeRozan is and is he even a plus player. Nowadays, it's just everyone universe, the city loved me like I'm DeMar DeRozan. Trust me, between that stretch, a lot of the Raptors fan base were split on this.
True.
Then before that, it was Andrea Bargnani.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and it kind of just goes on and on.
Which my guy Ball Don't Stop last night said he was a decade too early, by the way.
Oh, my goodness. He said Andrea's a hooper?
No. He said he would be Larry Market and dropping 49 today.
Call him a hoopero, man.
Oh, man.
That's
No,
so
but yeah, I think, I don't know, man. Like, the team is playing so bad. I like to just take I like to just blame everybody. Like, I don't think you can just blame one person. I like to blame the coaching staff. I like to blame every player. I like to blame the front office
really
as well.
can't skate on this one.
No,
man. The team sucks this
but
year.
the troubling thing for me, listening to this conversation and maybe just kind of reading the tea leaves and kind of seeing how the mood of the team has been this season is like just people need to get on the same page, right? I think when you hear Fred expressing his frustration about his role, you don't have to agree or disagree with it, but clearly, there's just some kind of divide in terms of just players and their roles and getting on the same page, and that has clearly contributed to the issues on the court. Yeah. So
you excited to talk about tonight's game?
Oh, yeah. And now it's time for Between the Lines, brought to you by Bet Rivers. It's a whole new game. Well, the line for tonight's game, the Raptors are hosting the New York Knickerbockers. The Raptors are 3.5-point favorites. RJ Barrett is out with a lacerated right index finger. And on today's episode of Is Otto Porter going to play? The answer is no. Otto Porter is on the injury report. So the Raptors are 3.5-point favorites coming off a loss to the Milwaukee Bucks.
I feel like I started the season really well with the predictions, and then as the Raptors started to get really weird and started to get really in flux,
Well,
the predictions have just been all over the place.
I have
for
an
me.
explanation for that. You usually pick the Raptors. So the Raptors were playing okay at the start of the season, and they have been terrible for 5 weeks.
That's a very good explanation.
That's
man.
the eye test right there.
That's the eye test. Eye test nasty on that one.
Yeah.
How do the Raptors keep getting favored if they keep playing poorly?
Well,
and keep losing?
RJ is a big injury.
Oh, RJ plays well against the Raptors, no doubt. Obviously, there's a real pride.
That is a fair question because early in the season when the Raptors were struggling, they were still a very strong home team at Scotiabank Arena, and they have also lost that as well in recent weeks. So it's a good question, but usually home teams, when you consider a maybe even type matchup, if you look at a Toronto, New York, they're kind of in the same range in the standings. You would give the home team the advantage here, but I don't know. Just what
who knows what the Raptors
it's
this
really
season? You know what the honest betting advice is? Don't bet on the Raptors either way. This is not a team that's predictable. I'm sorry, just not. It really isn't.
Take a look at the Brooklyn Nets tonight. They're 3.5-point favorites on the road
How'd you just know that off the top of your head?
against the New Orleans Pelicans with Zion Williamson out. So that would be a recommendation there.
They got to bounce back a little bit. Yeah. What am I gonna say? I'm gonna say it's gonna be like The Simpsons, say the line. The Raptors are gonna. I'm taking the Raptors.
Okay.
Look, listen, I'm riding with my team. If I had to put money on any team on the NBA, I'd still put it on the Raptors.
Yeah, just don't.
They played well against the Knicks last time out.
52 from Pascal.
Right. You would anticipate maybe Tibbs doing something different and hard doubling him.
Sure.
We'll see if they continue to do that drop back coverage against Scotty. But I think he's actually figured it out. Some really great quotes from Shoot Around, if you haven't heard those, by the way, about Scotty sort of reflecting on sort of how he's looking to attack that coverage. But look, listen, man, if the Raptors come out with the effort they showed against the Bucks, that should be enough against the Knicks. But, who knows with the Raptors. My honest opinion is don't bet the team, just avoid them for a while. But it is what it is. So that does it for us today on the Raptors Show. Make sure you find the Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts. Big thanks to the Zarar for coming on the show today. Big thanks to Alex for pulling up. All right, very insightful 15-minute cameo. Thanks to Derek Brandale and Jennifer Olner for helping us with the YouTube stream. And I'll be back next week.
Shows are Adam Silver.